Great news coming out over the weekend as we saw President Joe Biden sign into law officially the debt ceiling and spending bill, which we heard would have impacted Social Security, veterans benefits, SSI, SSDI, all of these fixed income benefits from the Social Security Administration, anything having to do with federal programs, it all would have been disrupted. And we're hearing that this not only would have impacted those, but our entire U.S. economy. Millions of jobs would have been lost, and this would have been felt not only in the United States, but all over the world if we would have defaulted. But now we've averted that. They have officially signed it into law, and now they can move on to other things like reforming Social Security. Stick around to the end, because as I've let you guys know, there are new bills that are being proposed. The Social Security 2100 Act is coming to the forefront, and it has reform, taxation changes, and also increases proposed in the bill you do not want to miss. Now, let me get you caught up on the latest that has unfolded over the weekend as President Joe Biden signed this into law. He's got a couple things to say about this as well in regards to Social Security and the U.S. economy. And I'm going to let you know how this is going to be impacting things moving forward, because this will be changing a couple of things. So let's get into all the details, though, so that way you can hear the latest on this great news that there will not be a U.S. default. Now, before we dive in, do me a quick favor, smash the like button. Just takes a second. If you appreciate the updates, helps out the channel a ton. Thank you so much. And if you want to stay up to date, it's totally free. Why not just hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. And if you want to get access directly to me to get specific information, you can go ahead and do so. Hit the join button. It helps support the channel, and you can join the members area. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in, and let's start off with a word from President Joe Biden, and then take a look at the details of everything that got signed into law over the weekend.
The stakes could not have been higher. If we had failed to reach an agreement on the budget, there were extreme voices threatening to take America for the first time in our 247-year history into default on our national debt. Nothing would have been more irresponsible. Nothing would have been more catastrophic. Our economy would have been thrown into recession. Retirement accounts for millions of Americans would have been decimated. 8 million Americans would have lost their jobs. Default would have destroyed our nation's credit rating, which would have made everything from mortgages to car loans to funding for the government much more expensive. And it would have taken years to climb out of that hole. And America's standing as the most trusted, reliable financial partner in the world would have been shattered. So, it was critical to reach an agreement. And it's very good news for the American people. No one got everything they wanted, but the American people got what they needed. We averted an economic crisis, an economic collapse. We're cutting spending and bringing the deficits down at the same time. We're protecting important priorities, from Social Security to Medicare to Medicaid to veterans to our transformational investments in infrastructure and clean energy. I want to commend Speaker McCarthy. You know, he and I, we and our teams, we were able to get along, get things done. We were straightforward with one another, completely honest with one another, respectful with one another. Both sides operated in good faith. Both sides kept their word. And I also want to commend other congressional leaders. House Minority Leader Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Schumer, Senate Minority Leader McConnell. They acted responsibly and put the good of the country ahead of politics. The final vote in both chambers was overwhelming, far more bipartisan than anyone thought was possible. So, I want to thank the members of Congress who voted to pass this agreement, which I'm going to sign tomorrow and become the law.
So that was President Joe Biden over the weekend as they passed the bill. Now let's take a look at this in more detail and some articles that came out over the weekend as well. Now this article says, with just 2 days to spare, President Joe Biden signed legislation on Saturday that lifted the nation's debt ceiling, averting an unprecedented default on the federal government's debt. The White House announced the signing, done in private at the White House, in an emailed statement in which Biden thanked congressional leaders for their partnership. The Treasury Department had warned that the country would start running short on cash to pay all of its bills on Monday today, which would have sent shockwaves through the United States and global economies. And here you can see the tweet that President Joe Biden released upon signing the bill. Republicans refused to raise the country's borrowing limit unless Democrats agreed to cut spending, leading to a standoff that would not have been resolved until after weeks of intense negotiations between the White House and Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy. The final agreement passed the House on Wednesday, then it passed the Senate on Thursday. It suspends the debt limit until January 1st of 2025, after the next presidential election, and it restricts government spending. It gives lawmakers budget targets for the next 2 years in hopes of assuring fiscal stability as the political season heats up. Raising the nation's debt limit, now at $31.4 trillion, will ensure that the government can borrow to pay debts already incurred. Now, as we heard him say in the speech, passing the budget agreement was critical and the stakes could not have been higher. Now, overall, the 99-page bill restricts spending for the next 2 years and changes some policies, including imposing new work requirements for older Americans receiving food aid and green lighting and Appalachian natural gas pipeline that many Democrats opposed. Some environmental rules were modified to help streamline approvals for infrastructure and energy projects, a move long sought by moderates in Congress. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that it could actually expand total eligibility for federal food assistance with the elimination of work requirements for veterans, homeless people, and young people leaving foster care. The legislation also bolsters funds for defense and veterans, cuts back on some new money for the Internal Revenue Service, or the IRS, and rejects Biden's call to roll back Trump-era tax breaks on corporations and the wealthy to help cover the nation's deficit. But the White House said the IRS plans to step up enforcement of tax laws for high-income earners and corporations. It'll continue. The agreement imposes an automatic overall 1% cut to spending programs if Congress fails to approve its annual spending bills, a measure designed to pressure lawmakers of both parties to reach consensus before the end of the fiscal year in September. In both chambers, more Democrats backed the legislation than Republicans, but both parties were critical to its passage. In the Senate, the tally was 63 to 36, including 46 Democrats and independents and 17 Republicans in favor, 31 Republicans along with 4 Democrats and 1 dependent who caucused with the Democrats opposed the bill. The vote in the House was 314 to 117. Now, take a look at this. This is a breakdown from MSNBC of what was in the debt ceiling agreement, and you can see the line items, the bullet points right here. It suspends the debt ceiling until January 1st of 2025, so they're going to be pushing this out past elections. Limits military spending to $886 billion. Limits non-military discretionary spending to $704 billion. It also rescinds about $28 billion in unspent COVID relief funds. And as you guys know, I've been checking the COVID money tracker. There was about $400 billion roughly of leftover funds for our stimulus packages still just sitting there. It's going to be pulling from that, which means that if this puts us under $350 billion, we're going to see that COVID money tracker drop down to about $300 billion in leftover funds. We're going to be taking a look at that shortly. And also it eliminates $1.4 billion in IRS funding. So all that money that we heard the IRS was going to be receiving to hire 87,000 new agents to audit the wealthiest among us and big corporations, they're going to be taking that money back. But as we just read, the IRS is still planning to ramp up their efforts to capture funds. It also is going to be restarting the federal student loan payment program. So the payments for student loans that have been in pause for the past 3 years, they're saying be ready for that to restart if you owe money in August. It also adds work requirements to SNAP and TAMP for those up to 55 years old. So you're going to need work requirements now for the food benefits. So the good news again is that we have averted a potential U.S. default that would have caused economic catastrophe, not only in our economy, but all over the world. And now we're going to be able to move on to some of the things that people have been waiting for quite some time, like Social Security reform. And I've let you know here on the channel that we heard 2023 was going to be the year of Social Security reform. In February, we saw Bernie Sanders reintroduce the Social Security Expansion Act, which across the board proposes all recipients should receive an additional $200 per month. It also suggests reforming taxation and an assortment of different things. However, President Joe Biden was not on board with that because it did not align with some of the things that he had promised. He had said there will not be increases in taxes for anybody making under $400,000 a year. That particular bill, it did have that. Now, there has been reintroduced the Social Security 2100 Act of 2023 now, and this particular bill we're hearing does align with President Joe Biden's promises, and we're also hearing it's starting to get traction in Congress. And I've shared the details with you here on the channel, but if you want to get more details, as we're hearing, this is making its way, check out this video right here to get the latest, and I will keep you up to date on everything. Stimulus, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, everything taking place with our nation. But with that being said, you guys, great news, and I will keep you guys up to date. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care. God bless. This is Steve.